The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to John. Jesus said to Nicodemus, "Just as Moses lifted up the serpent in the desert, so must the Son of Man be lifted up, so that everyone who believes in him may have eternal life. For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, so that everyone who believes in him might not perish, but might have eternal life. For God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but that the world might be saved through him. Whoever believes in him will not be condemned, but whoever does not believe has already been condemned, because he has not believed in the name of the only Son of God. And this is the verdict, that the light came into the world, but the people preferred darkness to light, because their works were evil. For everyone who does wicked things hates the light, and does not come toward the light, so that his works might not be exposed. But whoever lives the truth comes to the light, so that his works may be clearly seen as done in God." The Gospel of the Lord. I know many of us like to use computers because they make life a lot easier, especially when everything works. It's a good feeling, but that only lasts so long. At some point, you may start your computer only to see that worrying message text on the screen telling you that something didn't go right during the last shutdown. And when that happens, my dear friends, of course the screen will prompt you to choose from a few options, the recommended one being a restart with repairs made if necessary. The hope, of course, is that the error will not be a fatal one, and that your computer will be restored to the exact same way it was before, just the way you had made it, with all your bookmarks and that kind of thing. So, in other words, the default position. My dear brothers and sisters, on this fourth Sunday of Lent, which is also called letale, the Latin word which means rejoice, the opening antiphon invites us to joy. Rejoice, Jerusalem. What's the reason for this joy midway through Lent? It's really joyous. That's why even the vestments are different. You rarely see me in this rose, wonderful chasuble. We have even some flowers during the Lenten season here at the altar. The music is again different because we have to rejoice. Why? Why do we rejoice? The reason is God's great love for mankind, for humankind, as today's gospel tells us. For God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but that the world might be saved through him. My dear friends, I sometimes wonder how I see myself. What does each of our default positions look like? Okay, put it in another way. What is the real you what is the real me? Maybe you have never really thought about it. Maybe you have, and you don't like what you see. You don't like what you consider to be the real you. Is the real me a selfish person? Is the real me vindictive? Is the real me petty, deceitful, unforgiving? Is the real me ungrateful? Is the real me unkind or unloving? Certainly, my dear friends, we are all those things at times. But is that the real me? Is that the real you? Is that your default position, that particular setting that God has made you to embody? Do I see myself in the same way as God sees me, or in different ways? The way how we answer those questions matters. For God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but that the world might be saved through him. My dear friends, if we see ourselves as basically bad and unlovable, then our spiritual life becomes an uphill struggle to try to win God's love, to try to convince God to love us and not to condemn us. And that sort of self-image lends itself to a life lived in fear of God, a life lived to avoid God's wrath, a life in which we are doomed unless we can convince God otherwise. But if we see ourselves in a much different light, illuminated by what our faith teaches, that God created us out of love and in his image, then our lives become something entirely different. Our lives become filled with meaning and beauty and hope. It's good, dear brothers and sisters, to know our limitations and our weaknesses. We must be aware of them, however, not in order to despair, but to offer them to the Lord, who helps us on the path of healing and who never abandons us. God's mercy runs throughout today's readings. God's people added infidelity to infidelity, as we have read in the first reading. They were dead in their transgressions, as St. Paul has told us in today's second reading. And the gospel told us that the people preferred darkness to light. Do we see ourselves as God sees us? Can we let God forgive us and transform us anew? In other words, rebooting us to the way he made each one of us, each with our own uniqueness and gifts, those individual settings, if you will. Rejoice, Jerusalem. The antiphon says today, because God is with us. The Father, rich in mercy, who gave his Son to save us. And my dear brothers and sisters, this is our joy. So at all times, in all circumstances, we are all invited to come to the light. May we seek and always take that opportunity.